Now, I know what you're thinking. Is that another 911 model? And truth be told, you might have a point. This is one of roughly 25 different iterations that you can buy the 911 in. And that starts from the base Carrera right up until the GT3 RSs and the STs of the world. So where does this Carrera T fit into that lineup? And is it the 911 that you should be considering? Well, that's what we're here to find out. Right, let's talk specs for a second. Now, I've just mentioned this is the Carrera T. Now, where does that sit in the model range? Essentially, this is a base 911 Carrera. It's a 3-litre twin-turbo, flat six, producing around 380 horsepower and 332 pounds-feet of torque. Now, what Porsche have done is just sprinkle a few of those magical options on top, and we're not talking about anything too drastic underneath. We're talking about the options that you would choose in order to turn this into a proper sports car and a driver's car that Porsche can shout home about. So let's start with the obvious. We've got a 7-speed manual here, which you can't get in a base Carrera. You have to jump up to the Carrera S to select it as an option. Otherwise, you'll get the PDK gearbox, which of course we know is fantastic, but there's something very special about slotting home your own gear changes in a 911 sports car. It's how it should be, in my opinion. The difference between this and a regular Carrera is that we've got a few options that you can't get on a base Carrera, and those options help to turn this 911 into one of the purest and most exciting 911s to drive across the whole range. Now, you might think, well, that seems a bit silly. It's the slowest, and it is on paper. 0 to 62 takes 4.7 seconds. And the base Carrera does that in 4.3, and that's because it has a PDK gearbox to help speed up those gear changes. We're not bothered about that right now. We're on about the driving experience and feeling more involved with the car, and the weight saving that's gone on in order to create this Carrera T, with some 30 kilos lighter than the regular Carrera. And we've already mentioned this PDK gearbox, but we've also got less sound deadening, we've got thinner glass, and we've got a lighter battery. And of course, if you've probably peeked in the back, no rear seats, and all of that, as I said, weighs about 30 kilos less than the regular Carrera. We've got phenomenal power from that engine. We know it's a peach of an engine. It revs all the way out to 7, and it's quite clever in its power delivery because you don't get just a bucket load of torque in the middle and it fizzles out towards the top. Instead, you seemingly get power all the way right up to the red line. So what else do we get on this Carrera T? We also get the sports exhaust system. We've also got rear wheel steering, which you can't option again on a 911 Carrera, a base model anyhow. Now, it is optional on here and it is a couple of thousand, but it is well worth adding because not only does it add a bit of high-end stability, but it also helps with the lower speed corners and rotating the car. But on a practical side, the turning circle is drastically improved by having it. It helps turn the opposite way to pivot the car around. In true UK British fashion, we've had a whole 4 seasons of weather over the last few days, so I've managed to drive this in torrential rain with standing water and ice, and now today, which we've got, well, we did have sun, we've got a bit of cloud now, but across all of those weather changes, the one thing that stood out is quite how easy this thing is to drive, and easy it is to drive quick as well. In all conditions, it has a lot of grip, partly down to the size of those tyres, but also the aerodynamics, the shape, the traction control systems, and this new wet drive mode that Porsche have introduced. Now, the steering, as ever, is super precise. We've got the GT leather sports steering wheel, which is slightly thinner, and again, it is standard on the 911 Carrera T. Just listen to that engine rev all the way out. It's a long ratio in this manual gearboxes, and the Porsches seem to always have the longer ratios with the manual equipped cars, and that's no bad thing in this Carrera, to be honest with you, because we've got that twin turbocharged system. We've got torque nice and low down at about 2,400, 2,500 RPM right the way up. So we've got plenty of power. Elsewhere on this particular car, we've got these sports seats. They're lovely, they feel great, they're comfy. They're not quite as supportive as the bucket seats, but they do a brilliant job of keeping you in place and keeping you comfy. As for the brakes, we've got, well, they're regular steel brakes, but of course, being Porsche, they are fantastic. You can stomp on them, come to a stop in no time, and seemingly can do that time and time again without any fade. Now, of course, if you're doing track work, you might want to think about the carbon ceramics, because we know how brilliant Porsche's carbon ceramics are. Right, let's just dial things down a second. We'll knock it out of sport, back into normal mode on the drive mode switch just on the steering wheel here. I just want to take a moment to talk about some of the practicalities and how easy the 911 is to drive these days. Now, visibility is strong. We've got these sports seats which lift up and down, forward and back. You've got rake adjustment on the steering wheel, up and down. Adjustability and the way you sit in the car, the way you feel, everything just feels right. Trust me, you're going to want to drive it every single day as well, because the way this makes you feel, yes, it's 380 horsepower, and yes, it's the least powerful in the range and arguably the slowest. But for me, it's been up there with the most fun to drive, and it was only the GT3 that really topped that for me. And that car is so sharp and is so precise and so razor edge that it's almost a bit too much for the road and everywhere you go. And this, it just takes things back a notch, but still giving you the same drama and excitement that it should be giving you. And it's why, for me, the Carrera T is arguably the pick of the bunch. Now, before this test, the GTS was the pick of the bunch for me, because, again, I had that car with the manual gearbox, and that car came with 470 horsepower. And performance-wise, it was unbelievable. We're just going to test out some of that acceleration now. Now, 0 to 60 comes in around 4.7 seconds. We're not going to do a proper launch here, but we are going to... That's third. Yeah, I mean, it's a modern day Porsche. 380 horsepower on the road is enough power, trust me. It's enough to get you into trouble. It's enough to keep your hairs standing on edge. It's enough to keep your eyes focused. It is such a fantastic car to drive on a B road. It really is. I'm just sat here thinking, are there any caveats to this model? And I'm struggling to pinpoint any. I mean, nothing springs to mind. I don't want to utter the word perfect, because there are things. No, it might be perfect. It might be the 911 of the range. Now, and that's after driving the GT3 as well. There's something about this car, it's simplicity almost, or the engine's performance is fantastic, the chassis is fantastic, the way it handles, the way it drives, the way it makes you feel. The fit and finish in here, it's of a £100,000 car, it's luxury, there's no soft, hard, scratchy plastics, it's all finished nicely. The sports steering wheel, even down to the buttons used here, they're slightly inwards from the rim of the wheel so that you don't knock them on cornering. So if you want a 911 for pure thrills, for driving, for engagement, for some of that rawness that has kind of been lost over the years, this is the model for you. It takes everything that's brilliant about the base Carrera, none of the gimmicks, and just gives you a sheer beautiful driving experience. It's a sort of car that doesn't matter whether you're popping to the shops to pick up some milk or you're doing your weekly shop, because the space in the front at the front is enough for your weekly shop. It's enough to go away for the weekend. It's a perfect balance between performance and practicality. So is this the 911 you should be buying? Well, I'm going to go ahead and say yes, because it's the one that's reminded me just how good the 911 is and how fun it can be without a ridiculous amount of power. It's more than enough. It's bloody fast. And at this point, with how fast cars are today, I feel like the focus on driver engagement is more than welcomed. And I'm just going to enjoy these last few corners here before it starts to rain again. Ah, it's a joy. You can just float around these corners and there's so much power in the mid-range. What a sensational thing Porsche has built here, and I'm glad they focused on a little bit of that, a little bit of the lower end of the range rather than all of the top end. Let's take things back to basics.